The baby gorilla didn't run, not because he was brave, because there was nowhere to go. 5 hyenas, spread wide, moving slow, that slow that meant they weren't in a hurry. They knew. The cub sat low to the ground, arms slightly out, shoulders rounded. He wasn't posturing, he was just trying to look like less of a target. It wasn't working. His chest moved fast, small sounds came out of him, low, broken things, not a call for help. There was no one to call, just sound his body made when it didn't know what else to do. The hyenas didn't rush, they never do when they're certain. One on the left drifted closer, maybe 2 feet, stopped, tested. The cub's eyes tracked it, then moved to the next one, then the next. He couldn't watch all 5 at once. That was the problem. 30 seconds passed, maybe less, felt longer. Then the cub did something. He slammed both hands flat on the ground, hard. A sharp cry came with it, raw, sudden, the kind of sound that should have meant something. The hyenas paused, all 5, just for a second. Then the closest one took another step forward. The bluff hadn't worked. They'd seen it before, and they were still hungry. The circle tightened, not fast, just steady, the way water rises. You don't notice it until it's already too high. The cub pressed back, hit nothing. Open ground behind him, open ground everywhere. No trees close enough, no rocks, no cover, and no sound from the grass that meant anything good. He was alone, not lost alone, the kind where someone is looking, truly alone, the kind that doesn't have a next part unless something changes. One hyena lunged, not a full commit, a test, fast enough to mean business. The cub flinched hard, fell back a half step. One arm came up, useless, instinctive. The hyena pulled back, laughed its broken laugh. The others shifted, reading it, recalibrating. That was the moment, right there, when it stopped being a standoff and started being something worse. Then the cub went still, not calm, just stopped. His eyes moved to something behind the hyenas. The hyenas felt it too. Not sound, not movement yet, something else, a change in the air, the way a room feels different before the lights come on. They stopped circling, all 5, heads up, ears forward. Whatever was coming, they weren't sure they wanted to meet it. Neither was the cub, but he stopped making sounds. And somehow that was the most frightening thing of all. The hyenas didn't retreat, not yet, but something had shifted in them. They weren't circling anymore. They were standing, heads raised, ears pushed forward, reading the air. Pack animals don't spook easy, but they also don't ignore what their instincts tell them. And right now every instinct they had was saying wait. The cub didn't move either. He stayed low, eyes no longer tracking the hyenas. He was looking past them, into the grass, into whatever was behind that stillness. His breathing hadn't slowed, but his sounds had stopped completely. That meant something. Animals don't go quiet when they're more afraid. They go quiet when something changes the nature of the threat. Then it came again, low, not a roar, not a warning call, something underneath all of that, a sound that didn't need volume to carry weight, the kind of sound that doesn't ask for your attention. It just takes it. The nearest hyena stepped back, one step, involuntary. It didn't even seem to notice it had done it. The others repositioned, not running, not committing to anything, just subtly adjusting. The confidence that had been in them 2 minutes ago was leaking out slowly. They were still 5. Whatever was out there was still hidden, but the math was starting to feel different to them. The grass moved. Not much. A slow parting. The kind that something large makes when it isn't trying to hide anymore but still isn't rushing. The shadow came before anything else. Low and wide. Moving without sound. The hyenas tracked it. The cub tracked it. Nobody moved. One hyena made a sound. Short, clipped. A signal to the others. They tightened briefly, then spread again. Uncertain. The structure of the hunt was gone now. What had been 5 confident animals working a sure thing had become 5 animals standing at the edge of a decision they weren't sure they wanted to make. The cub watched the shadow move closer. He didn't scramble away from it. He didn't press himself flat. He just watched. There was something in the way he held still that wasn't panic anymore. Not relief either. Something quieter than both. Like a part of him, some old wordless part, recognized what was coming before his eyes could confirm it. The hyenas made their decision, not all at once. One turned first, took 3 steps back, stopped, then a second, then the third and fourth together. The last one held the longest, standing at the edge of the space, looking at the shadow, then at the cub, then back again. Then it turned too. They didn't run. Hyenas rarely run from something they haven't fully seen, but they left, quietly, without the broken laughing, without looking back. The savanna went still. The cub stayed exactly where he was. The shadow stopped moving. For a moment nothing happened at all, just the grass, just the light, just the space where 5 hyenas had been standing 30 seconds ago and weren't anymore. Then the rescuer stepped forward, and the grass finally gave way. It was a silverback, not young, not small, the kind of animal that has stopped needing to prove anything to anything else on the ground it walks on. His coat caught the light in patches, dark across the shoulders, that wide stripe of silver running down his back like a seam in stone. He moved into the open slowly, not because he was cautious, but because nothing about this situation required speed. He had already won. He just hadn't told the hyenas yet. He stopped about 15 feet from the cub, stood there, said nothing, did nothing, just existed in that space with a kind of density that changed the feel of everything around him. The grass seemed quieter, the air seemed heavier. Even the light felt like it had shifted slightly, the way it does when something very large moves through it. The cub didn't run toward him, didn't make a sound. He just sat where he was, arms still slightly out, watching. His breathing was still fast, but his body had stopped bracing. Something in him had already recalibrated. The danger had a shape now, and this, whatever this was not that shape. The silverback's eyes moved across the open ground, not frantic, not searching, slow and deliberate. He scanned where the hyenas had been, tracked the direction they had gone, then brought his gaze back to the cub. He looked at him for a long moment, not the way a predator looks at something, the way something old and certain looks at something small and uncertain. Taking stock, deciding, he took one step forward. The cub flinched slightly, shoulders up, head down. The silverback stopped, waited, let that moment pass. Then he lowered himself slowly, not all the way down, just enough to reduce his height, reduce the wall of himself, make the space between them feel less like a distance that had to be crossed, and more like a space that could be shared. It was a small thing. It was everything. The cub's arms came down, slowly. His shoulders dropped a fraction. He was still watching the silverback, still reading him, but the quality of that watching had changed. It wasn't threat assessment anymore. It was something closer to attention, the kind you give to something you're trying to understand rather than something you're trying to survive. The silverback moved again, not toward the cub, but sideways, slow. He positioned himself between the cub and the direction the hyenas had gone. Not with urgency, just a shift of weight, a repositioning of that massive body, placing himself squarely in the space between the small animal and the open ground where the danger had come from. It was instinct, ancient and clean, the body knowing what needed to happen before the mind could name it. The cub watched him do it, watched him settle into that position, watched him go still again, and then slowly, low to the ground, arms close to his body, the cub moved, not fast, not straight. He angled toward the silverback the way a small animal approaches something it wants to trust but hasn't fully decided to yet. A few feet. Stop. Red. A few more feet. Stop again. The silverback didn't react, didn't turn to look at him, didn't reach out, just stayed where he was, present, still, solid, like something that had been there a long time and intended to stay. The cub got close enough to touch. He didn't. He sat down just beside the silverback's left flank and went still. His breathing had slowed. His eyes were still open, still watching the grass, but the tension had left his body the way tension does when it finally has somewhere to go. He leaned, barely, almost nothing against the silverback's side. The silverback shifted his weight slightly to hold it, didn't look down, didn't make a sound, just held it. That was all. No fight, no chase, no moment of violence that announced itself and demanded to be remembered. Just a large animal standing between a small one in the open world, and a small animal finally still enough to let that mean something. The savanna didn't care. The light kept moving. The grass kept its own time. Somewhere out past the tree line, the hyenas were already becoming something else's problem. The space where they had stood was just space now, empty, ordinary, already forgetting what it had held 10 minutes ago. But here, in this small patch of ground, something had settled. Something that didn't have a name in any language but was understood completely by both animals present. The danger was gone, not because it had been destroyed, because something had stood up and made itself known, and the danger had looked at it and made a reasonable decision. The cub pressed slightly closer. The silverback breathed slow and even. His eyes stayed on the middle distance, watchful, patient, unhurried. Still the same animal he had been when he walked out of that grass, still asking nothing from the moment, just occupying it, fully, the way only certain animals know how to do. The threat was over. The ground was quiet, and for the first time since this started, the cub wasn't alone in it. They stayed like that for a while. No movement, no sound worth noting. Just the two of them occupying the same quiet piece of ground, while the savanna went back to being what it always was, wide, indifferent, and completely unmoved by what had just happened inside it. The silverback was the first to move. Not away, just a slow shift of his weight, a repositioning of his legs beneath him. He rose without ceremony, the way something that size always moves, like the ground has an agreement with him about it. He didn't look back at the cub. He just stood, surveyed the open ground ahead, and after a moment began to walk, slow, steady, no particular urgency in any part of him. The cub watched him go. 3 steps, 4, then something moved in the cub. Not thought, not decision, just the pull that small animals feel when the one solid thing in their world starts moving away from them. He got up, stayed low at first, arms out, checking the ground the way he'd been checking it for the last hour. Then he straightened slightly and followed. He didn't walk beside the silverback. He walked a little behind, a little to the left, close enough to be in the same world as him, far enough to still be figuring out what that meant. The silverback didn't adjust his pace, didn't slow to let the cub catch up, just kept moving in that even, unhurried way, and trusted that what needed to follow would follow. The grass moved around them as they walked, long yellow stalks bending at the tops in the late air. The light had shifted, lower now, warmer, the kind of afternoon light that makes everything look like it's been here a long time and plans to stay. The shadows ran long and flat across the ground. Somewhere to the east a bird called once and didn't repeat itself. The world was doing what the world does. It had already moved on. It always does. The cub kept pace. His movement was still careful, eyes checking left, checking right, the instinct that had been running hot in him for the last hour, not quite ready to power down completely. But his shoulders were lower. His arms swung a little more freely. The tight braced quality that had been in his body since the hyenas appeared was loosening, not all at once but steadily, with each step that put more distance between him and that patch of ground. Once he stopped, just briefly. He turned and looked back at where it had happened. The open space, the flattened grass where the hyenas had circled, the exact spot where he had slammed his hands down and cried out, and it hadn't been enough. He looked at it for a moment, not long, just enough. Then he turned back and kept walking. There are things that leave a mark even when they don't leave a wound. He would carry that place in his body the way all animals carry the places where they almost didn't make it. Not as memory exactly, more like a new layer of knowing. A recalibration of what the world is capable of and what it sometimes, not always, but sometimes offers in response. The silverback had stopped ahead of him, waiting, not obviously, not with any signal, just standing at the edge of a slight rise in the ground, looking out over the land that fell away below. When the cub reached him, he didn't acknowledge it, didn't look down, just stood there, the same as always, big and still and utterly at home in himself. The cub came up beside him and stopped too, looked out at what the silverback was looking at. Miles of open ground, scrub and grass and the dark lines of distant trees, and above all of it the sky doing what the sky does in that part of the world, in that kind of afternoon, burning slow and enormous and not particularly interested in anything happening below it. They stood there together for a moment, just 2 animals on a rise of ground looking at a landscape that had no edges they could see. One of them very large and certain of his place in it. One of them very small and only just beginning to understand what that place might be. Then the silverback moved again, down the far side of the rise, into the longer grass, heading toward the tree line in the middle distance. His movement had a direction now, a purpose that hadn't been visible before. Somewhere ahead of them, not far, maybe 10 minutes of walking, there were others. You couldn't hear them yet, couldn't see anything, but it was in the way he moved, the slight forward lean, the sense of orientation. He was going back, and he was not going back alone. The cub followed without hesitation this time, the gap between them smaller than before, not touching, not quite, but close, close enough that if the silverback stopped suddenly, the cub would nearly walk into him. He didn't seem to mind that, didn't adjust, just let it be what it was. The grass got taller as they moved into the lower ground. It closed around them both, around the silverback's broad back, around the cub's small head just visible above the tops of the stalks. Then even that disappeared. Just the grass moving, just the sound of 2 animals walking through it, one set of footsteps heavy and even, one set lighter and slightly less certain, both headed in the same direction. Before they disappeared completely, the cub did something. He stopped, just for a second, and turned, looked back over his shoulder at the open ground behind them, at the sky, at the long empty stretch of savanna that had almost been the last thing he ever saw. He looked at it the way you look at something you know you're leaving, not with sadness exactly, not with relief exactly, something quieter than either, an acknowledgement, a moment of witness. This happened. I was here. I made it through. Then he turned back, and he walked into the grass, and the savanna closed behind him like it always does, without ceremony, without memory, without any particular interest in what it had just held and released. The ground where it had all happened was already just ground again. The light moved across it the same way it moves across everything else. The grass stood up where it had been pressed flat. Whatever the hyenas had left behind, scent, intention, the invisible shape of what they had almost done, the wind was already pulling it apart, grain by grain, moment by moment, returning it to nothing. There are days on the savannah that end in loss, more of those than the other kind. The land doesn't editorialize, it doesn't arrange things toward meaning, it just runs its own logic, patient and enormous, and everything living inside it finds a way or doesn't. But today, on this particular piece of ground, in this particular slant of afternoon light, a small animal that should not have made it past the morning, had walked away into the grass beside something solid and certain and larger than his fear. Not because the world had decided to be kind, not because anything had been promised or arranged, just because one animal had come out of the grass at the right moment and stood in the right place and made everything that wanted to hurt something small reconsider its options. He was never meant to fight. He didn't have the size for it, the weight, the years. What he had was smaller than that, and more durable, the ability to stay still long enough for help to find him, to not give up the last few seconds, to be exactly where he was when the grass moved and the shadow came, and the thing that changed everything stepped forward into the open. He just needed someone to stand beside him, and today, for reasons the savannah will never explain and doesn't need to, that's exactly what happened.